was no mercy found here. Not even all the gold in the world could buy back the soul that was stolen in the dark. Look at the tears of a mother, look at the laughter of the wicked as they dance upon a shallow grave. It was a time of pure disaster, a time when the shadows thought they had finally swallowed the sun, and the innocent were left to rot in the cold mud of the river. But listen to me carefully, the grave is not a place of rest for those who were murdered, and the water never hides a secret forever. This is the story of Amanda. The elders say that when a man decides to chase a harmless chicken, he must remember that he will be the one to stumble and fall, while the chicken runs free to see another day. In a small village where the red dust tells 1,000 secrets, there lived a girl whose heart was as clear as a mountain spring. Her name was Amanda. To the world, she was just a poor widow's daughter, but to the angels, she was a masterpiece of grace. She lived in a humble hut with her mother, a woman who had buried her husband and poured every drop of her remaining hope into her only child. They had no gold, they had no silver, but they possessed a peace that the rich people in their big mansions could never understand. But you see, the world does not like a light that it did not light itself. In that same village lived Selina, the daughter of Chief Okoro. Selina was a girl who had everything money could buy, yet her soul was as empty as a broken pot. She was joined by Clara and Neka, two girls who followed her like shadows follow a thief in the night. They hated Amanda. They hated the way she walked with her head held high despite the patches on her dress. They hated the way the sun seemed to follow her every footstep. You must know that jealousy is a disease with no cure, except the total destruction of the one who is loved. The wickedness did not start with a push into the river, it started with the poison of whispers. It started when Selina told the village that Amanda's mother was a witch who traded her husband's life for her daughter's beauty. It started when Clara tripped Amanda into the mud and laughed at her tears, and when Neka stole her book so she would fail and remain in the dirt. But Amanda was like a tree planted by the riverside. The more they tried to cut her down, the deeper her roots searched for life. She did not know that a storm was coming, a storm of blood that would wash away her life, but leave behind a ghost that would haunt the very ground they walk upon until justice is served. Amanda's life was a constant battle between the beauty of her spirit and the ugliness of her surroundings. Every morning before the first cock crowed, she was already at the village stream, the cold water biting at her ankles as she filled her clay pot. She would look at her reflection in the water and pray for a day without pain, a day where Selina and her group would simply forget she existed. But a proverb says that the hawk does not forget the chick it has marked for its dinner. At school, the atmosphere was like a boiling pot. Selina, Clara, and Neka had turned the classroom into a courtroom where Amanda was always the accused. They would wait for her by the school gate, mocking the way her mother sold roasted corn by the roadside to pay her fees. Selina would flaunt her expensive leather bags and imported shoes, standing in front of Amanda to block her path, telling her that the scent of poverty was clinging to her skin like a second shadow. Clara would record Amanda on her phone whenever she was crying, laughing as she shared the videos, while Neka would go to the teachers and lie, say Amanda was the one starting the trouble. The psychological torture was heavy, it was a disaster of the soul. Amanda's mother began to notice the light fading from her daughter's eyes. She would sit Amanda down and say, "My daughter, the forest may be thick, but the sun always finds a way to touch the ground. Do not let their darkness quench your fire. But even the strongest bridge can collapse if the weight of the world is too much." One Friday, the wickedness reached a new level. Selina decided that humiliating Amanda wasn't enough, she wanted to see her bleed. They trapped her in the back of the library, and for the first time, the bullying turned physical. They tore her books, the only things she truly owned, and Selina slapped her so hard that the sound echoed through the empty hall. "You think you are better than us because you are smart?" Selina hissed. "In this village, money is the only brain that matters." Amanda fell to the floor, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. She didn't fight back, not because she was weak, but because her mother had taught her that a person who carries a basket of eggs does not start a fight in a stone market. But as she walked home that day, with blood on her lip and her dreams in tatters, a change began to happen deep inside her. The peace was being replaced by a cold, heavy stillness. The village elders say that when you see a calm dog, you should not kick it, for you do not know the spirit that guards its silence. Little did the three girls know that by tearing Amanda's books, they were writing the first chapter of their own destruction. The plan for the river was now forming in Selina's mind, a plan born from a jealousy so deep that it had no bottom. Life for Amanda was not just about the classroom, it was a life of heavy labor and sweat. After school, while Selina and her friends were being driven home in expensive cars, Amanda would tie a wrapper tight and head to the plantation. She spent her evenings helping her mother harvest and carry heavy bunches of plantain on her head, her neck aching under the weight of their survival. They would sit by the smoky fire, peeling and frying plantain to sell to travelers, the hot oil popping and leaving small scars on Amanda's hands, scars she wore like medals of honor for her mother's sake. But back at school, the wolves were getting hungrier for her tears. Selina, frustrated that Amanda's spirit had not yet broken, decided to move from insults to a wicked frame-up. One morning, while the classroom was empty during assembly, Selina crept to the back. She took a large bundle of money, the school's festival contribution, and a gold-plated watch belonging to the principal's daughter, and she stuffed them deep into the bottom of Amanda's tattered school bag, hiding them beneath her torn notebooks. When the theft was announced, the school was thrown into a panic. Selina was the first to point her polished finger, her voice full of fake shock as she screamed that she saw the poor girl hovering around the teacher's desk. The principal ordered a search, and the silence was deafening as the money and the watch were pulled from Amanda's bag. The shame was a disaster that money could not wash away. Amanda stood like a statue, her eyes wide with a horror that had no words, while Selina, Clara, and Neka stood in the corner, smacking behind their hands. The whole school labeled her a thief. The girl with the golden heart was now a girl with a black mark. Even the teachers, who once loved her, looked at her with disgust. A few days later, seeking a moment of peace from the whispers that followed her everywhere, Amanda went to her favorite spot under the great Iroko tree. She sat there with one of the few books she had left, trying to find a world where people were kind. But the peace did not last. The shadow of Selina fell over her pages. Without a word, Selina reached down and snatched the book from Amanda's hands. "A thief has no right to knowledge," Selina hissed. She ripped the cover off and threw the book into the mud, stepping on it with her expensive shoes, grinding the pages into the dirt. Clara laughed her high-pitched, mocking laugh, while Neka told her that the tree was too good to give shade to a criminal. They left her there, sitting in the dust with her ruined book, not knowing that the ancestors were recording every insult. The elders say that the ground you humiliate an innocent person upon will one day be the same ground that refuses to bury you when you die. Amanda picked up her mud-stained book, her tears finally falling, but they were no longer tears of sadness, they were the first drops of a coming flood. The plot for the river was now the only thing left in Selina's dark heart, for she had taken Amanda's reputation, she had taken her peace, and now she wanted the only thing Amanda had left, her breath. The sky that Tuesday was a strange shade of purple, as if the heavens themselves were bruised. After the incident with the stolen money and the ruined book, Amanda had become a ghost even before she died. She walked through the village like a shadow, her head bowed, her heart heavy with a shame she did not deserve. Her mother, seeing her daughter's spirit withering like a leaf in the dry season, tried to comfort her with a bowl of warm plantain, but Amanda could not eat. The insults of Selina, Clara, and Neka were ringing in her ears louder than any words of love. Seeing that Amanda was at her lowest point, Selina decided it was time to finish what she had started. She sent Neka, the one with the honey tongue, to find Amanda. Neka lied to her, saying that the principal's daughter had found the real thief and wanted to apologize to Amanda privately at the edge of the Black River to avoid a scene at school. Amanda, who was always ready to forgive, believed the lie. She thought her name was finally going to be cleared. A proverb says that the sheep that follows a wolf because of a smile will not live to see the sunset. As Amanda reached the riverbank, the air turned cold. There was no principal's daughter. Instead, out of the thick bushes stepped Selina and Clara, their faces twisted with a cruelty that was not human. They didn't want to apologize, they wanted to terrify her. They surrounded her, mocking her one last time, telling her that even if the school cleared her name, the village would always remember her as the thief girl. They pushed her back and fought like a rag doll, their laughter echoing off the water. Amanda pleaded with them, reminding them of the days they used to sit in the same classroom, but Selina's heart was a locked room with no key. "The river is deep, Amanda," Selina whispered, her eyes burning with a jealous fire. "Deep enough to hide a girl that nobody wants." With a final, violent shove, Selina's hands met Amanda's chest. There was a desperate scream, a frantic clawing at the air, and then a heavy, hollow splash that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The water closed over Amanda's head, her yellow dress disappearing into the darkness like a dying star. The three girls stood on the bank, watching the ripples fade into nothing. They felt a momentary thrill of power, not knowing that they had just traded their souls for a moment of spite. They turned and ran back to the village, cleaning the mud from their shoes, thinking they had buried their secret in the depths. But the elders say that water has a memory, and the river never swallows a life without eventually spitting back the truth. As the sun went down, a strange mist began to rise from the spot where Amanda went under, a mist that did not move with the wind, but stood still, waiting for the moon to rise. The river was silent, but the village was not. As the stars began to poke holes in the dark velvet of the sky, a strange thing happened at the small hut of Amanda's mother. The old woman was sitting by the fire, her heart pacing like a trapped bird, wondering why her daughter had not returned from the apology meeting at the river. Suddenly, the wooden door creaked open. There stood Amanda. Her clothes were dry, but her skin had a paleness like the morning mist, and her eyes looked as if they had seen the end of the world. Her mother jumped up, rushing to her, asking if she was alright and why she was so late. Amanda didn't say much, she only nodded and whispered, "Mama, I am here to help you." That night, the spirit of Amanda moved through the house with a heavy sadness. She helped her mother peel the last of the plantains for the morning market, her hands moving with a speed and silence that felt unnatural. Her mother watched her, noticing that Amanda was crying silently, her tears falling but making no sound as they hit the floor. "My daughter, are you okay? Did those girls hurt you again?" the mother asked, her voice full of worry. Amanda looked at her mother with a love so deep it could move mountains and simply said, "Mama, I am just tired, but I will help you until the work is done." The mother, not knowing that she was talking to a soul that had already crossed the great divide, felt a strange chill in the room, but she brushed it off as the night air. The next morning, the spirit of Amanda did a strange thing. She took her school bag, which was now unnaturally light, and told her mother she was going to school to finish her business. Her mother, wanting her daughter to be brave, kissed her forehead, not noticing that Amanda's skin felt like cold stone, and watched her walk down the path until she disappeared into the morning fog. But as the sun climbed to the middle of the sky, a group of fishermen arrived at the village square with a scream that shattered the peace. They had found a yellow dress floating near the rocks. Back at the school, the seat where Amanda usually sat was empty, but the air around it was so cold that no student could stay near it. The mother, hearing the commotion in the distance, felt her heart finally break. She realized then that the daughter who helped her peel plantains the night before was not a girl of flesh, but a daughter of the wind. The search began, but the three girls, Selina, Clara, and Neka were already trembling in their classrooms, for they saw Amanda standing in the hallway, dripping with river water, even though the sun was shining bright outside. The day they pulled Amanda from the water, the sun refused to shine, and the tree stood still as if in a state of mourning. The wail that left her mother's throat was not the cry of a human, it was the sound of a heart being torn in two. The village was thrown into a dark confusion, for everyone wondered how the girl who knew the river so well could have fallen in. While the women of the village gathered to wash the body and prepare it for the earth, Selina, Clara, and Neka stayed locked in their rooms, thinking that if they stayed silent, the truth would stay buried. But a proverb says that you can cover a smoking fire with a cloth, but you cannot hide the smoke from the sky. On the night of the burial, the air in the village changed. It became heavy and wet, smelling of river mud and rotting lilies. Selina was lying in her expensive silk bed, but she could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard it splash, 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 the sound of someone treading water in the corner of her room. She sat up, her heart hammering against her ribs, and saw a trail of wet footprints leading from her door to the foot of her bed. The footprints were small, the size of a young girl's feet. When she looked in her mirror, she didn't see her own beautiful face, she saw Amanda standing behind her, her skin grey and bloated from the water, her eyes staring with a hunger for justice. Selina screamed, but no sound came out of her throat. At the same time, in her own house, Clara woke up to find her room flooded with 2 inches of cold, dark water, even though it had not rained. Every time she tried to scream for her parents, the water would rise and fill her mouth, tasting of salt and river weeds. Neka, the whisperer, was the most terrified of all. She began to hear Amanda's voice in every wind, whispering her name, reminding her of the lies she told the principal. The girls tried to meet the next morning to talk, but they found that they could no longer look at each other without seeing Amanda's face superimposed over their own. The village elders began to notice that the 3 girls were losing their minds, their hair was unkempt, their eyes were bloodshot, and they smelled of the river no matter how many times they bathed with expensive soaps. The mother of Amanda, sitting by the fresh grave of her daughter, felt a cold breeze stroke her cheek. She didn't know it, but Amanda was there, standing in the shadows of the Iroko tree, watching the girls who destroyed her life. The revenge had not even reached its peak. This was just the first drop of rain before the great flood that will sweep the wicked away. The elders say that a man who carries a stolen maggot in his pocket should not be surprised when birds start pecking at his trousers in the middle of the market. The 3 girls, Selina, Clara, and Neka, thought they could go back to school and pretend that life was normal, but Amanda had other plans. It was a Wednesday morning, during the middle of a heavy mathematics lesson. The classroom was quiet, with only the sound of the teacher's chalk scratching against the board. Suddenly, the air in the room turned ice cold, so cold that the students began to see their own breath in the air. Selina was trying to write, but her pen kept leaking a dark, muddy water instead of ink. She looked up, and her heart stopped. There, sitting in the front row, in the very seat that had been empty since the funeral, was Amanda. She wasn't a shadow, she looked as real as the day she died, but her hair was dripping with river weeds and her eyes were fixed directly on Selina. To the rest of the class and the teacher, the seat looked empty, but to the 3 guilty girls, Amanda was the only thing they could see. Amanda began to stand up, the sound of water dripping from her clothes hitting the floor like a loud, ticking clock, drip, drip, drip. She walked toward them, her feet leaving wet, muddy prints on the wooden floor. Selina began to hyperventilate, her eyes bulging out of her head. Clara started to shake so hard her desk rattled, and Neko let out a strangled whimper. The teacher stopped writing and asked, "Selina, what is wrong with you?" But Selina couldn't answer. To her, Amanda was now standing right over her desk, leaning down until their noses almost touched, smelling of the deep, suffocating river. Amanda reached out a cold, blue hand and touched Selina's throat. That was the breaking point. Selina let out a blood-curdling scream that shook the windows of the school. She jumped over her desk, knocking over her books, and bolted for the door. Clara and Neka followed her, screaming and crying as if the devil himself was chasing them. They ran out of the classroom and across the school compound, falling into the mud, pointing at the empty air behind them and begging for mercy. The entire school, the principal, the teachers, and the students poured out of the buildings to watch. They saw 3 rich, proud girls rolling in the dirt, tearing at their own clothes, and shouting, "Amanda, please. The water is too cold. We are sorry for the push." The secret was out. The disaster they had hidden in the dark was now being screamed in the bright light of day. The principal stood there with a heavy heart, realizing that the thief they had shamed was actually a victim of a murder. The confusion turned into a dark realization for the villagers. But for Amanda, the revenge was not finished with a simple confession. She wanted them to feel the weight of the water she had swallowed. The news of the girls' madness in the school compound spread like wildfire through the village. The chief, a man of justice, ordered the masquerades to bring Selina, Clara, and Neka before the village council. They were no longer the proud, rich girls the village knew. They were trembling, smelling of river mud, with eyes full of a terror that had no name. The chief sat on his throne and pointed his staff at them. "The earth is crying," he said. "The river is restless. Tell us what you did to the daughter of the widow." Under the pressure of the village elders and the unseen presence of the ghost, the girls fell to their knees. Between tears and snot, they confessed how they had framed Amanda for theft, how they had torn her books, and how they had lured her to the Black River to teach her a lesson that ended in her death. The village gasped in horror. The chief ordered that they be led back to the very spot on the riverbank to show where the body was pushed. As the procession reached the water, the atmosphere turned thick. The sun disappeared behind a dark cloud. Suddenly, the water began to swirl and foam. Out of the depths, Amanda rose. She was not the sweet girl who fried plantains anymore, she was a queen of vengeance. She stood on the water, her gaze freezing the hearts of everyone present. She walked toward them, her feet not sinking. She first touched Neka's eyes, and instantly, Neka let out a piercing cry as her world turned to eternal blackness. She was now blind, never to see the light of the sun again. She then blew a cold breath on Clara, who immediately began to dance and laugh hysterically, her mind leaving her body forever as she became the village madwoman. Finally, Amanda stood before Selina. Selina tried to beg for mercy, mentioning her father's wealth, but Amanda simply pointed to the deep water. A sudden, violent wave rose up like a hand and snatched Selina from the bank. The villagers watched in frozen silence as Selina was pulled into the dark heart of the river, her screams muffled by the waves until there was nothing left but bubbles. The debt was paid. Amanda looked at her mother one last time, a single tear of joy falling from her ghostly eyes, and then she faded into the mist. The moral lesson of this story is that the blood of the innocent is a fire that no amount of wealth can put out. Be careful how you treat those who have no one to defend them, for their defender is the Great Spirit above. If you sow the seed of wickedness, you must be prepared to harvest the fruit of destruction. Thank you for following the story of Amanda. If you want to see more justice served, please like this video, comment, "Rest in peace Amanda," and subscribe to our channel, African Cinematic Tales, for the next episode. Your support helps us tell the stories that must be told. Share this video to warn a bully today. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.